Welcome everyone to the 5th edition of the NEC on the Run Hoops podcast. I'm Ron Ratner. I'm here with Ryan Peters, a talented writer who writes for the NEC Overtime blog. We're going to break it all down this week. We've crossed the halfway point of the NEC men's hoop season. Let's see where we're at. As always, we start with our weekend takeaways. So take it away, Ryan. What jumps out at you?
7 teams within 2 games of first place, 4 teams within 1 game of first place. Robert Morris kind of came back to the pack last week, but they lost 2 nail-biters against St. Francis University and Fairleigh Dickinson. You look at second place right now, you have Fairleigh Dickinson, St. Francis, Sacred Heart, all there at 6-4. All 3 of those teams are playing really well. Specifically, you look at FDU, they've won 5 in a row. They have the best offense in the league right now, according to efficiency. They're scoring 1.17 points per possession during their 5-game winning streak. They're shooting 50% from 2, 46% from 3, 77% from the free throw line. They're basically doing their damage with 6 players, and typically Greg Herenda, he likes to employ a deep rotation. Not this year. He has everything he needs in those 6, and they're making it work.
I mean, I think they're 6-4, but even that's a bit deceiving because they could easily be 8-2. They've had a lot of close games. Even early on when they started 1-4, you could see that they were going to make a push at some point.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, they just have a great collection of talent that complements each other. We're going to talk more about Jaleel Jenkins, but he's a great point guard, great scorer in Darnell Edge. That front court, you know, I love that front court of Holloway, Williams, and Bishop. They have a lot of pieces that definitely can make it work.
Let's get to the Flash right now. Preseason favorite. Again, another slow start, but they seem to be heating up at the right time. That was a big win out in Moon last week for the Flash.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, Rob Criminal's now getting consistency out of his big 3. And when I say big 3, I mean Jamal King, Isaiah Blackman, Keith Braxton. You know, those 3 and these 3 wins that they've had recently, they're averaging 51 points, 18 rebounds per game, and Braxton's really leading the way. You know, against the Mountain, he had 27 points, 10 rebounds, but the stat that I love in that, he had 0 turnovers. You think about it, he took 15 shots in the game. To have that much usage and to not turn the ball over against the Mount, against that pressure defense is really impressive. And additionally, you look at the other players. Andre Wolford has found, you know, he's found his confidence behind the arc. Randall Gaskins is back to being that kind of Bruce Bowden 3-and-D type of player that was so valuable to them last year. You know, it's just a really good collection. They're the deepest team in the league, in my opinion. They're the most experienced team, and the preseason #1 is back in the mix for a regular season title.
We got a Bruce Bowen reference, a San Antonio Spur. Very good, well done. All right, let's move over to your alma mater, Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart's sort of been in the mix all season, but there's a kind of stat that jumps off the page a little bit about you that you may not expect.
Yeah, you know, defensive efficiency, they're actually leading the league right now in defensive efficiency. They held St. Francis Brooklyn last Saturday to 0.84 points per possession. Really impressive performance. It's really simple. It's a simple formula. When Sacred Heart holds opponents to 1 point per possession or lower this year, they're 6-1. And you know, they're doing a great job. They're not turning opponents over, but they're staying in front, they're challenging shots. And then of course, when you have Jarrell Spellman down there in the low block, that helps tremendously as well.
Ryan, we've gone through all the teams on the top, but just bubbling underneath, you have 3 teams tied right beneath them, all of whom you could easily see getting a top 4 spot at year's end. You have Wagner, you have Bryant, you have St. Francis Brooklyn, all at 5-5 heading into play this week.
Yeah, they're absolutely in the mix. You know, Wagner, they have one of the best players in the league, Ramon Saunders, so anything's possible. St. Francis Brooklyn, I love Jalen Jordan, and you know, you can't count out anyone with Glenn Sanabria on the team. And with Bryant, Jared Grosso's done a tremendous job. You know, look at Bash Towns, he's an all-league type of player. That backcourt of Hawkins, Kasperzik, and Adam Grant, you know, that's a deep backcourt. They could definitely do some damage. I would not count them out yet.
Bash Towns is one of the best stories in the league to me this year, how his game has evolved. And I think where Bryant can go can be attributable directly to where Sebastian Towns can take them.
Yeah, Towns, he came into the offseason a little bit overweight, but to his credit, he's gotten in shape. He's kind of bought into that 12-7-4 mantra that Jared Grosso is selling Bryant. Now he's an integral part of that team moving forward.
They're not part of the second place mix, but they did have 2 very big wins last week. Let's talk a little bit about Central Connecticut and where you think they may be headed.
Yeah, I don't like to use the term must-win middle of the year, middle of the regular season, but those were 2 important games to win. Get back to 4-6. They're now in the mix. You know, every time I'm in this chair, we talk about how great Tyler Cole is. You know, player of the week. And then Daniel Marshall got some significant contributions from his role guys, Jumeirah Coleman, guys like even Carrington Wallace and Mike Underwood. They came off the bench and produced. Dion Buttes had a nice performance here in the regular season. So Central Connecticut, they don't count them out just yet.
Ryan, before we wrap the weekend takeaways, I want to get back to Robert Morris. And despite them losing twice, for me at least, it almost reinforced, even though they lost twice, how good they actually are. Playing teams like St. Francis and then on the road at FDU going to double overtime, that they're in this for the long haul.
Yeah, they were down 1 with 10 seconds left in that St. Francis game. And then, Maddie McConnell was kind of shut down a little bit by Randall Gaskins, but they were right there. They literally could have won that game. FDU, double overtime. You had a couple of key contributors, John Williams, Maddie McConnell fall out, but then Tracy hits a 3 to tie it up in the first overtime. They absolutely could have won that game too.
So we're 10 games into the 18-game season. It's heating up at the top. Teams competing for top 4, top 8 positions heading into March. Those are our weekend takeaways. It's time for our game of the week. No, we call it the game of the week. This may have been the game of the year. Hackensack on Saturday, league leader Robert Morris against hard-charging FDU. How did it all go down, Ryan?
I mean, that's the second double overtime game in Hackensack, which is incredible. Two contrasting styles, great offense, great defense between FDU and Robert Morris. Went right down to the wire. Josh Williams and Darnell Edge were putting on a clinic from behind the arc. Darnell Edge tied a career-high 28 points. Josh Williams with 34. Just contributions galore. Elijah Williams with 17. Like I mentioned before, Andy Toole's getting contributions from Tracy late in the game based on foul trouble. So it was a great back and forth. 10 lead changes, 9 ties along the way.
One of the key players in the game, I thought, was FDU's Elijah Williams. FDU uses a short bench, but he's been really picking it up. One of the better big men in the league.
He's very versatile. He could play the 3, 4, 5. He could face up on the perimeter. He could do some damage in the interior. He's a really good, versatile piece for Greg Herenda to use off the bench.
And then on the other side in that game, Malik Petway doing what he does every week, bringing the production.
I love Malik Petway, 17-7 against FDU. Just versatile. He brings it on both ends of the floor too. We've seen the highlights with the steals and the blocks, and offensively he could score in the low block. He's a complete package as far as front court players are concerned.
It was a great game. It was an NEC playoff type of game. That's how it felt to me. And maybe we do see those two teams match up again come March. Okay, now it's time for our NEC Play of the Week. Out to Moon Township, we talked about it earlier. SFU, RMU, Battle of the Keystone State. Isaiah Blackman, check out this dunk off the backdoor feed from Braxton. Great seeing those hops from Isaiah Blackman. How dynamic can he be when he could take it to the hole like that while also hitting 45% from 3?
He's like the best athlete, one of the best athletes in the league when he's healthy, and we saw a glimpse of that against Robert Morris. The hops are back. The thing that he's so valuable for Rob Krimmel is he could actually create on his own. So when a play breaks down late in the shot clock, you just isolate Blackman, he takes his defender off the dribble, and then creates opportunities for himself and others.
It was a memorable play for Isaiah Blackman and a memorable game for the Red Flash, who win at RMU. One of the things I love about this league is the camaraderie and sportsmanship between our players. We see it at our media days and at our photo shoots. How about this for our NEC Twitter timeout? Maddie McConnell gets his 1,000th career point, and there he is getting a hug from one of his rivals. He's matched up head-to-head with Jamal King.
Yeah, 2 4-year veterans in the league. They understand, as freshmen and sophomores, they kind of struggled through adversity. Jamal King didn't play much as a freshman. Maddie McConnell dealt with injuries throughout his underclassmen career. But these two, they understand how hard it is when they put the work in, but now you see them, they're basically integral parts of their respective team. And it was nice to see King kind of put the competitiveness aside and congratulate McConnell on his 1,000th point. It's really nice to see the respect that each of them show for each other.
Yeah, props to Matt Freed for getting that photo. It's a good one. That's our Twitter timeout. Now it's time for our ever popular under the radar player. You mentioned him earlier. Going to New Britain for this one.
Jumeirah Coleman, in many respects, he's quite similar to Joe Hughley in his versatility. And in fact, Central's been without Joe Hughley 4 of the last 5 games due to injury, and Coleman has stepped up big time, averaging 16.5 points, 9 rebounds a game. He's converted 19 of 21 from the free throw line. He was integral in those 2 games that Central won against Bryant and St. Francis Brooklyn.
I totally agree with you, Ryan. Another one of those 6'6", 6'7" wing types, versatile guys that Donyell Marshall is just stockpiling over there. Central's going to be a tough out when we move into March.
Yeah, Marshall excels at getting these junior college guys, Cole, Hughley, Butte, and Jumeirah Coleman's another example of that.
Time for this week's Star Watch. And this week's player, I got to see in person again last week. And boy, is he a flash out there. Tough to guard, really controls the game. Tell me a little bit about Jaleel Jenkins on FDU.
Oh, I love Jenkins. Just a dynamic player for Greg Corenda and FDU. He's one of the fastest players in the league, but we talked about FDU playing 6 guys, so their tempo has slowed down quite a bit. But Jenkins he's done just fine in the half-court set. Once he gets past his defender and is going downhill, creating opportunities and good looks for his teammates, he's one of the best in the league. One stat, it's not the be-all, tell-all, but 52 assists against 18 turnovers for a 3.0 assist-to-turnover ratio in league play. Terrific stat. And, Greg Corenda's leaned heavily on Jenkins for, he's played about 90% of the team's minutes. So for him to have a 3-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio is pretty impressive in my opinion.
When I see Jenkins, he reminds me a little of Tony Parker. He's got that mid-range game. He's got that ability to attack the basket amongst the trees out there. I love watching him play. I think that there's not many players in the NEC who can stand in front of him and keep him out of the lane.
Tony Parker's a great comp because Jenkins excels at kind of switching speeds, right? Kind of shifting, and he'll kind of lull a defender to sleep, and next thing you know, he's like a flash, and he's getting to the rim basically.
We've arrived at our NEC Milestone segment, which should be renamed the Keith Braxton segment, since it seems we focus on him week to week. This week, tell us, Ryan, what did Keith Braxton do?
Well, Ron, he reached a top 25 all-time in the conference in total rebounds, 792, which is incredible. This is not a 4-year player we're talking about. This is a 3-year guy. He actually tied former St. Francis Red Flash player Earl Brown. He's about to bypass another power forward great in that program, Ronnie Drinnan. It kind of tells you the job that Eric Taylor has done, an assistant coach for Rob Krimmel on the Red Flash, coaching up the bigs. He was a tremendous player in his own right, and he's kind of passing his lessons on to that 3, Drinnan, Braxton, and Earl Brown.
It's funny that we call Braxton a big because he's not really a big. He's really a guard out there. But it is impressive, and he does have a chance to break the league's all-time record for rebounding next year, held by Jalen Cannon, which is really remarkable when you think about it.
Yeah, Cannon was getting rebounds right at the start of his freshman year. So if Braxton is lucky enough to get there, that's an incredible accomplishment.
Ryan, now it's time for our game to watch this week. What do you got?
Fairleigh Dickinson at Sacred Heart on Thursday night. 2 of the 3 second-place teams doing battle. Both are 6-4. Sacred Heart puts their undefeated home record in league play on the line, 5-0. You have the best offensive efficiency in the league in FDU, the best defensive efficiency in Sacred Heart. I mean, just the matchups are going to be a ton of fun. Jenkins against Cam Parker, E.J. Anasicki against Bishop and Williams, Mike Holloway against Jarrell Spellman, Sean Hohen against Darnell Edge. I could go on and on about this game. It's gonna be a lot of fun to watch.
Ryan, I am looking forward to that game for sure. Along with that one, jam-packed week of NEC TV. On Thursday, we are back on ESPNU when St. Francis U hosts Central Connecticut. We talked about both teams on this show. It's a 5 p.m. start on the U. Saturday doesn't bring 1, but 2 ESPN doubleheaders. First one, we are in Fairfield. Sacred Heart welcomes Mount St. Mary's. The women tip off at noon on ESPN3, followed by the men at 3 p.m. on ESPN+. After that, scene shifts out to Moon Township. Robert Morris hosts Central Connecticut on ESPN Plus at 4 p.m., followed by the Colonial Women taking on Bryant at 7 p.m. A busy day of NEC TV coming up on Saturday. As always, all other league games can be seen in HD and for free on NECFrontRow.com. That about wraps it up. Ryan, thanks again for joining us in studio.
My pleasure. 8 games to go before the regular season ends. It's going to be an exciting time.
Ryan, will definitely have you back in before the season ends to kind of set the scene as we approach March Madness. But for now, we'd like to remind you there will be no show. We're off next week, but we will be back in 2 weeks for the next episode of NEC on the Run.